Okay, TJ Dagger here. We're going to look at a couple things in this video. Where in the last video we looked at polygons, what they are, and that sort of thing. This time we're going to look a little bit more at textures themselves. We're going to look at how to add textures, how to import them, and we're going to look at blending textures. So first thing, we're going to look at how to add a new texture, or even edit. We'll look at editing. Here's the default text. You always start with this grid. You can simply change that by clicking on the left panel here to change the left one. That's simple. By default the map is already covered with the primary on the left, and if we change this one, so basically at any time you can edit textures and change the different textures in each panel, and it'll affect everywhere on the map that texture exists. So now when you can add more textures simply here by clicking add, and whatever texture you have selected up here when you end up with a list is what it will make a copy of when you add, and that's pretty handy for when you start looking at how textures all blend together. So just give that something different. So this is where we're going to look at later about how to make things blend. Okay, but first we're going to look at importing some textures. So here we've got the import button. If you click that, you bring up this little palette here that gives you a list of all the available maps. So we'll just select a map here, and we click OK, and it adds all our textures that are from that map. And once you start to get a few textures on the map, you start to get a few in your list over here, it gets a bit tricky to work out which text you want to be putting where on the map. So there's an easy way to load your brush here, and that is to hold down Control and simply click anywhere on the map, and wherever you click, that's what it loads up over here. So when you're editing and doing more fine detail and blending and stuff, you can quickly switch between between textures by holding down Control and left clicking on the map, and it'll load your brush with whatever texture is currently on that position in the map, or more technically, whatever texture is on that specific polygon that you click on. So there we go. Alright, now when you save a map, so we'll quick save this. We'll save it as test map. Yep, we can overwrite that one. Okay, you see a bunch of the textures actually disappeared. That's because when you save it, it only writes to your map folder only the textures that actually exist on the map. So you can always import the ones you previously had, but it won't retain them in your map folder unless you've actually painted them on the map somewhere. Okay. So we're going to look at blending some of these textures and how we go about that. So here's something to note. To make your texture brush bigger or smaller, it's plus on the keypad and minus on the keypad to make it smaller. So plus and minus on your keypad, hold them in bigger or smaller. Okay, so we're going to look at blending some of these textures and how we go about that. So here's something to note. To make your texture brush bigger or smaller, it's plus on the keypad and minus on the keypad to make it smaller. So plus and minus on your keypad, hold them in bigger or smaller. Okay, so let's look at what we've got here. I'm holding the right button down. You'll see wherever I paint, it's got the primary texture surrounding it. And if I do the left button, it just does the primary texture alone. So we want to know, how would we blend this this field texture in with the sand? So that's what we're going to look at. How are we going to do that? So we'll first give yourself a little bit of room around it by adding a bit more of the texture you want to blend. Now what we're basically going to need is, we're going to need something that has the sand as either a primary, and so we need something that's made up of those two textures basically. That's what we got to do. So let's have a look at this. So what's that? That's floor sand 1. Alright, floor sand 1. So let's make a copy of this. So add, and we'll turn the secondary here to floor sand 1. Sand. Okay. So if I right click and hold down, I'm going to end up with this. Now it's not complete, as you can see. Now this is where if you accidentally go like that, you can easily just hold control, click that texture and buff it out. So it's really good to be able to quickly change between textures. So as you can see, it's still not doing exactly what we want. So we now need an intermediate. So we've got a transition here, and now for the final piece. So you can see it's a multi-step process. Now we're going to want something with the both of the sand 1. So where are we? So here we go. And now we've got a smoother transition between the 3 different textures. And what are they? We've got the original sandy grass here. Let's put some grass there. And then we've got the double. So we need a buffer zone. And you will be back and forwards. It's really handy to know how to quickly select with the control, holding control to select the existing texture. Otherwise you'll pull your hair out when you get a few in there trying to work through your list. Okay, so we go from this one to an intermediate of the both, and then one that's these two, and then across to them. And that's how you've got to build up your textures to blend them. And as you can see here, if we want to make this gap between here smaller, we would have to go into our polygons, make our, again with the plus and minus on the keypad to make that bigger and smaller. So if we go through and added some more polygons in there, we could then go to our textures, and we could then really bring that gap much closer together based on how big our polygons are. And then you need there's our one here. So there you can see we could make that gap a lot smaller, and you can click polygon by polygon even when you get in there close. So you can make those gaps smaller. You can even go back then when you've got it how close ever you want it, can even go back and get rid of some of them excess polygons. And when you're making your polygons bigger, again, you're clicking on the intersecting lines, not the middle of anything. You're clicking on the excess, so you can optimize, re-optimize that. It's sometimes easier to do it straight away than come back at the end of the map, because yeah, you've just got so much more. And even if here you can see things start to move around, it's just a case of grabbing your texture brush and just getting the right texture and clicking on those intersecting points to touch it up. So that's the basics of blending. As you can see, it can be finicky, it can be fiddly, but the more you do it, the more rehearsed you get, the quicker, easier, more efficient you become at it. And that's blending textures. So cheers.